second. Perfect. Okay, so without further ado, we'll get into sort of the content of what we're here to talk about today. As I mentioned, I've got a series of sort of short questions that people can answer. Feel free to get involved as well. It's not just necessarily for the panel to speak about, although as much as I want them to be the center of attention. So the first question, I thought we'd go with something really bold and completely wide open and sort of just work out what sort of state we're necessarily talking about. So is the world getting better at science communication? Obviously, somebody mentioned COVID-19 and the need for it at the moment with communicating correct information or rumors and things like that. So what do you guys think? Is the world getting better at communicating science?
I'll start. So for me, that's like a yes and a no thing, because like in general, it's really easy to share stuff nowadays. Like we have the internet with everything. You can make blogs, you can write if that's your thing, you can make art, you can make videos, or you can like scream into the void, whatever you prefer. Like it's really easy to communicate science, but that also comes with the price that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And we see that now as well with the whole COVID situation and certain people telling you to ingest or inject stuff that you really shouldn't be ingesting or injecting. And it gets out there and people start to lose the thread. They don't know what to trust anymore. And that can backfire, because then the legitimate science, like the people who know what they're talking about, they'll fall into the same category as all the other ones. And then people just don't know what to trust anymore. So it's like it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot that Fabian brought up. I actually do think we're getting better at science communication. It just seems like we're getting worse because we have more challenges. Because our opposition, the anti-vaxxers, earthers, and like anti-climate people, it's so easy for them to make a blog and put it up. And I think that maybe Nicole will want to talk about this in a little bit more since she's interested in education. We also have to not only communicate science, we need to teach science literacy. People need to understand where their information is coming from and what they should trust. And I think that this was very apparent during when that pandemic video came out. You had a video where a woman was saying, "I'm a scientist." So we can't just plainly say, trust science, trust scientists, because there will be a couple of strange scientists who want to push forward a certain agenda. So how do we teach people to know what to trust and what not to trust? I'm done if you want to go, Nicole.
Yeah, so I think I completely agree with Carrie and Fabian. I was kind of thinking about this question earlier, and it's like, I think that sorry, my cat just jumped into my lap. Generally, I think scientists have gotten better with science communication in terms of, like Fabian was saying, there are so many more outlets for each of us to, some people prefer writing, some people prefer videos or art. Like there's so many more mediums for us to tap into, which is awesome. But yeah, I agree where I think maybe some things that we could still improve on is the more education aspect. And I think that's kind of where I've come from. That's like, I kind of grew up with like, I'm one of the few scientists in my family. So it's like, I've been very aware of that's like, oh, like if you break down a concept and just kind of like really try to plainly explain it, that helps so much. And I think definitely sometimes as scientists, we need to remember to take that step back and really just like, not like dumbing it down is not the right word, but just kind of like break it down into like simple terms or like with analogies that people can relate to. Because I found that if someone can relate to the information you're presenting, they're much more likely, even if they don't fully accept everything you're saying, they'll think about it more and it will resonate with them more. And that's just like another piece of the puzzle in helping them just better understand how the world works and what we're all doing.
Okay, and another sort of side question that I had attached to that is, what's your opinions on everybody recognizing how we should be communicating science and sort of saying the right things, and then things actually being put into practice and things being done? Do you think that there's a discrepancy between what everybody's saying science communication is and what it should be, and how many people are actually taking that step to do it?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that a lot of people here are active on Twitter, so maybe you feel this way as well. Sometimes I'm on Twitter and we have all these ideas going around that are very positive and very progressive. And I get this feeling in my head that all scientists feel this way. And then I go to work and people don't all feel that way. So, you know, it's not every scientist is going to agree on everything. So it needs to be an active discussion that we have. For example, I'm a huge fan of dropping a lot of jargon when we speak to each other. I think that's important for science communication. And even as a scientist who understands the jargon, like I enjoy not having super dense conversation and super dense material always thrown at me. But I'm right now writing a review paper with my PI who's telling me the opposite, and that I need to do the opposite of what I read on Twitter. So I think it's going to be a conversation amongst scientists to come up with a consensus of how we should communicate. And there is always going to be disagreement, and I think that's okay.
No, definitely. Okay, so on that note, I'll launch the first poll. Please do let me know if you can't see this, or if there's any problems with it. Can anyone see that on their screen?
Yep, at least it's visible to me, so it should be okay.
Okay, perfect. And fingers crossed I clicked the box for anonymous. I'm just hoping I did. I'm pretty sure I did. I'll give it, I can see how many people have voted, so I'll give it a few more seconds. I quite like the fact I can see the results before everybody else.
Oh, feeling special.
Feel the power, yeah. I might just not show everybody.
Just be like, okay, next question.
Exactly. Okay.
Tune in next week for the results.
Share results. Can everybody see the results of the poll?
Yes.
Okay, so a general consensus in this call, at least, that the world is getting better, which is a good positive note to start on. I'm kind of glad that we came up with that. Otherwise, I think things could have gone downhill potentially. Okay, so the next thing, in recognition that, the world is getting better at science communication, that sort of suggests that we're learning new ways to communicate, ways to get our information across in sort of a simple way, if that makes sense. So what approaches, and obviously you can all draw on your own personal experiences here, what approaches have you found that work well in conveying your message?
So for me, I would agree with what Carrie and Nicole already said before, about like taking out the jargon and making it easier for everyone to understand, at least when you're talking to the general public, so to speak, because it really depends on what kind of audience you have. But it's like the safest thing for me is to just talk like you're talking to a normal person. Like if you would have to explain it to your parents, so to speak, if your parents aren't academic, I guess that's like a first generation thing maybe. But explain it like a normal person. And then scientist or not, everyone should be able to understand, even other scientists, because we're not all in the same field. And I'm pretty sure that someone in a completely different field will not understand all the jargon that I'm using anyway. So that doesn't matter. And if you keep it simple, but not too simple, that's also, of course, a big thing, which we might come back to later. And with that, like keeping it simple, it's something I also experience when just giving presentations as well. Like if you're presenting your results and stuff, to not talk about all the details and all the fine stuff, even though you're like super proud of everything you did, because like, you did this amazing analysis and it was super hard, it took you a week to program. It's great, but usually other people, they don't care about that. And it's kind of sad, but it's true. And I try when I give my presentations about stuff, I try to like focus on a single message, at least per slide or per segment. Like just focus on one thing you want to tell people and tell that. And there's like a ton of details that might be part of that, but you can always come back to it. Or if there's questions about it, people will ask. But the rule of thumb for me is just always focus on one thing.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. That's like, kind of try to stay focused and, kind of break down the jargon or get rid of it as much as you can. I think something else I would add to it, and maybe this is also part of like doing YouTube, that's like, of course, there are some topics that you just can't throw comedy and jokes into. Like they're very serious So obviously you need to kind of like feel the room, check your tone and all that. But I do think when it is possible, throwing in a little bit of comedy also really helps, because like I'll never forget in college I was having this conversation with this random person, and like I told them that I do research in a lab, and they're like, oh, but like that building, like it's so drab and scientists are so boring. And I was one, very offended, just being a scientist myself. And it's like, I think it kind of did open my eyes too. That is how sometimes people see people who work in labs. It's like they're just kind of like these lab robots, and there's no like humor or personality. So as is appropriate and possible through whatever your medium is, like show your personality, show your humor. And especially for a general audience, I think that just helps you be more relatable and help them to see you as like a real person. And again, just helps with that connection.
Yeah, Nicole, I think that's a great point that you bring up. You know, scientists are people. We're not just stiffs in like white coats. We're capable of talking. We're not completely nerdy. Like we are people when it comes down to it. And I think that people are, our audience is more likely to interact with us if they see our personalities. For me too, writing my blogs, I love being able to interject my personality in my writing because I'm not allowed to do that in academic writing. So if anybody is getting involved in SciComm, for me, that's like great from a selfish perspective for my mental health, that I get to engage in science in a creative way, which is great. Another tip I would say too for conveying information is just keep it short. From a writing standpoint, everybody wants to read a chapter of a book every time they click on a blog post on Twitter. And even when I have conversations with my family, you know, during COVID-19, people ask me a lot of questions, even though I'm not a virologist or an epidemiologist. And I try not to lecture other people. No one wants to be lectured. We're not teachers that are, you know, in a classroom and chalkboard. You know, keep it short and give openings for people to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. And what would you all say that your sort of preferred format of taking in information yourself is? So for example, obviously Nicole, you have a YouTube channel where you're starting to make videos. Kerry, you have the blog and things like that, and there are ways that you prefer to give information out to other people, and sort of that's your passion in that sense. Would you also say that it's the same in how you consume content as well? Is it, for example, Nicole, I have YouTube videos and videos on to the way that you like to take in information, or is that just like what you enjoy producing?
I think, yeah, like my main go-tos, especially with like science and stuff, does tend to be either YouTube or Twitter, and like different people that I've followed on Twitter. I think those are my two main go-tos, because like Carrie was saying, like they are generally usually kind of like nice and quick, because like being a PhD student, time is of the essence often. So if it can be like a short, like quick 5-minute video, I'm all in for it.
Yeah, and I mostly read. So I do click on a lot of blog posts, or, you know, I read science journalism. I just like reading in general, so I think it just translated over to science too.
Perfect.
Yeah, for me, it's like kind of the same. I prefer short videos. Everything, as long as it's not, it doesn't take too much time, then it's good for me, because we spend a lot of time reading for our work anyway. So
Yeah, definitely. And almost like I prepared earlier, it's probably a good time to launch the poll to find out what everybody else thinks. Am I right? So I'll launch that poll now, and everyone can, it might take a little bit more time because there's more options on this one, so feel free. And you'll realize that there's not a box to tick both or all or this one and this one. You've just got to bite the bullet and make a decision, I'm afraid.
Ooh, I know I said I liked reading better, but I actually chose infographics. I like a good infographic.
I don't know why this is making me smile so much, seeing these live results come in. I feel like it's the election or something. Nearly everybody's voted. We'll give it one more minute. Well, 10 seconds. Okay. Let me share the results. So as you can see, I think the main thing that I would take from this is not necessarily what's people's favorite. And I don't think it's to say, oh, everybody needs to start writing blogs. This is the way to communicate things. And a question that we'll come on to later as well is sort of, who were you trying to target with your science communication? So everybody here would probably classify themselves as a researcher or a member of at least sort of an academic community, and we're sort of discussing in what I would call a bit of an echo chamber of everyone has similar views on things, if not exactly the same. So it's not to say that this is what the public would like or what would cater to a non-scientific audience, but I think the general spread, the fact that every single option has got a vote, shows that there's various methods that you can use that can be successful. And probably a good place to start is what you find exciting yourself, or what you find that you can actually put some effort and time into, because it's going to be more enjoyable for you. So moving on to the next sort of question, with that in mind of different ways that we can communicate science, what would you say you found are the most common errors in science communication? You don't have to call anybody out on it, but maybe errors that you've made yourself previously, or things that you see that often you come across and you think, oh, they should have done it in this way, or this is an issue that is reoccurring.
Okay, so on Twitter, and also like when people give presentations, and I see a lot of presentations as well. When it comes to errors, it's kind of similar to what we already talked about, is that people don't keep it short. They try to focus on everything, and they get really into the details, and you lose your audience real quick. And if you lose your audience, it's really hard to get them back. And the thing is that people really want to share everything they did, and people want to be very precise and accurate and not make any mistakes. And then the hardest thing to tell as scientists, and it's a scary thing, and some get angry, is that you don't have to be 100% accurate. If you're talking to a general audience, or even a non-expert scientific audience, your message, like your conclusion or whatever it is you want to share, that is your point. That's what you want to teach them. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. If you can get your message across, and you can get people to be invested in what you say, then you already won. And the people who are really interested, you can get them over onto your side, and they will start asking questions, and then you can talk about specifics, or they might look into more details. But like, generally speaking, nobody really cares about all of those really scientific details about all the methods that you used and why something is technically not correct. It's, yeah, you want to reach as many people as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is my microphone on? Yes, it is. Okay. I would say one of the biggest mistakes I see, again, we said this before, is length. I've quit on a lot of blog articles. So if you're advertising your message on Twitter, a lot of times people are just in an elevator or on a train or something, you know, they don't have the next 20 minutes to dedicate to whatever your SciComm is. And then the second thing I would say is that sometimes people put their ego above their message. You should always remember the purpose of you communicating is to get your message across. It isn't to prove to other people how smart you are, or how competent you are, or how good of a writer you are. It should always be the message first. I understand branding does matter, but that should come second after what you're portraying to other people. And then the last mistake I would say that people made, and I saw this a lot during the pandemic, especially at the beginning, is when scientists are mean to people who don't understand science. I saw it, and this happened again around the time of the pandemic video, and those chiropractors who were trying to say stuff about COVID, where scientists would post on Twitter, like, you're an idiot if you're watching this video, or obviously you have no idea about blah, 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 if you don't agree with me. You're not gonna win people over to your side by doing that. So I would definitely try to be empathetic if you are persuading people, rather than yelling at people or, you know, humiliating them. That's not a good way to do science communication.
Mm-hmm.
I think I agree, like, pretty much completely with everything that, like, Carrie and Fabian said. I think they touched on a lot of what I would have said for this question. Yeah, it's like length, or I know a big thing for me, and part of it is, you know, because of doing YouTube, it does become a lot easier. I'm a very visual person. So if I can think of a visual aid to explain something, that just automatically makes my job 10 times easier. It's like when people don't take advantage of visual aids they can come up with, you can even just like kind of jerry rig something at home, you know? Like, I think that sometimes can be a big downfall. And also, yeah, like what Carrie was saying, that's just, and then, like, you know, sometimes like we all kind of get upset and kind of our emotions can run away from us. And it's like, and it's really hard to check yourself in those moments. But definitely, yeah, if you're explaining something that's like seen as controversial or an issue in like modern society, it's like you kind of do need to try as best you can to take a step back and not demonize the people who are struggling with this, because odds are it's likely that they don't understand or have a bubble just like we all do. So just like being aware of everyone's social media and news bubbles, I think can really help in that, not criminalizing or demonizing anyone, because that's not going to make anything any better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you said about sort of visualizing things and being sort of a visual learner is something that I can see people agreeing with in the chat box. Pauline mentioned how she sort of has more of a passion for making stuff visual, so therefore that's the method that she tries to use, which I think is something brilliant to start on, because like I said before, if you know how you like to consume things, then you can almost make an assumption that at least some other people will like to consume things in that way. Obviously it's a problem when you're trying to reach people that maybe aren't as similar to you. So I can see Nidhi mentioned that she's had the problem that Kerry mentioned about making things way too long. And I think it's something that we've all been guilty of when we're passionate about something and we're writing about something. I know when I formulate tweets that we're going to put out for Scientistt, or prepare something to put on the platform, and because I've been thinking about it so much, and me and Hassan have had all these conversations about it, and I could explain it in so much detail, that's what I want to sort of tell everybody else. But you have to just remind yourself that what's the important thing that I'm saying is only a few sentences, and sort of that's what I need to communicate. But I think it's a learning process, and no one's an expert on it at all, I don't think. So to launch the next poll, there we go. How confident do you feel when communicating your work? Obviously, you might fit in between some of these brackets. Some of them are a bit more extreme than others. But yeah, just think about how you might feel when you communicate it. Do you feel like you're dreadful at it and you get scared before you press tweet or press blog post, or are you fine?
Sorry, could you also just tell us the results of the poll? Because I can't see them. I can't participate. So just wondering if you could, I don't know, maybe read it out or something at the end. I don't know.
Not a problem. Yeah, that's
Thank
absolutely fine.
you. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Thanks for letting me know. It's perfect. We'll give it 15 more seconds. Okay, let me share the results. So in terms of how confident everybody on this call feels when communicating their work, 44% of people feel confident, which is brilliant. Obviously, it's subjective depending on what you feel confidence is. 25% of you feel average, so neither here nor there. 19% of you feel slightly underconfident in when you're communicating your work, and then 13% of you, which is 2 people, you've got this. This is easy for you, and I respect that. Thanks for the honesty. I'm glad that somebody put it out there. I look forward to finding out who you are and seeing your communication. Okay, so let me stop that poll. Okay, so linking to that and coming on to sort of the final question before we go through a Q&A and allow anybody to jump in with anything, is in recognition that some people feel confident, underconfident, like amazingly confident with how to communicate things to an audience. How can we communicate things to a non-scientific audience or outside of what we would call the academic community? So for a lot of people, so for example, Fabian, you mentioned how a lot of the things that you put out are through tweets that people enjoy or people can relate to and things like that. But I'm sure you'll agree that a lot of your followers might be other people that are doing a PhD or are involved in academia and things like that. So does anyone have any thoughts on how we can do more to broaden our reach and reach those people that it might be a little bit harder to make understand our work?
So on at least on Twitter, from what I've experienced, and also when you, well, for the more scientific side, if you go to conference and stuff, but let's stick to mostly on Twitter, is to get to your community is to be part of your community, more or less. Because some people, you might see those really big accounts and they're more like mouthpieces of very famous people, and they put out a lot of tweets and mostly talking about themselves, and everyone seems to like that because they all know them. but they're not really talking to their audience. You don't see them commenting on people's stuff. You don't see them just talking to other people on their tweets. I think that gives a bit of a weird idea of how you should use Twitter, or in general how you should communicate to an audience, especially if it's a general audience that doesn't know how stuff works. For me, I found that it's enjoyable just to also talk to other people. Like, not everyone needs to just listen to you. You also just listen to other people, talk to other people about their work, because in the end, what people really enjoy talking about is themselves most of the time. And they can talk about a lot of stuff about themselves because they know a lot about themselves and what they do. And building that relationship with a community or with an audience or whatever, that's the way to also get your message across, because then they know you. And if you then send out something, if you write a new blog or you post a new video or you have a big Twitter thread that you make, they will see that, they will comment on it. And we have all these fancy algorithms on the internet that measure how much engagement you get and all that kind of stuff. You kind of have to work those algorithms as well, and then people actually see it. And if you just work that algorithm and talk to your community and get people involved, and also get involved with other people, then your reach kind of expands. And then you get outside of that bubble of your own followers. At least that's what I've experienced, but I don't know what the rest said.
Yeah, I would say similarly for YouTube. So for anyone who has either like early in YouTube, kind of like I am, or you're thinking about it, YouTube does have this really nice feature where for each of your videos, and I believe also for your channel as a whole, it will tell you like where your audience is coming from. So for example, on like most of my videos so far, like I can see that most of my traffic is coming from posting to Facebook, and which is kind of nice because actually like a lot of people that I'm friends with on Facebook are, you know, it's like the whole spectrum of people I've met throughout my life. So people from high school, elementary school, like college and grad school. So like, and so if you still have like a platform like that, like Facebook, where it's more not just scientists, because I know I have a Twitter, but it's pretty much, you know, mostly a scientific account, kind of posting on those platforms as well, because then you broaden your audience and just kind of get to reach more people and engage with more people, and again kind of like break out of the bubble that we sometimes build around ourselves. So yeah, I would definitely recommend, at least for YouTube, and I'm sure there are other sites that have this, like look to see where people are mostly finding your content and just kind of like build on that, / like keep posting on those platforms because it's working.
Yeah, so I've actually noticed something similar too, where, you know, my Twitter is mostly science, and I have had a few posts that did very well with more of a general public. And when I had those posts that did well with the general public, I got a lot more feed through my Facebook. So I found that, you know, friends and family were willing to repost stuff on Facebook, and then so on and so forth. People were willing to click on the links because of that. And the reason why it had more of a reach to the general public, those posts, was because they were relevant. There was something going on in the news. One was hydroxychloroquine related, and then the other post that did really well with the general public was math modeling for coronavirus. You know, we were watching the news, and they always say math models, math models, math models, and no one knows what a model actually means for COVID. And what was important also to get the general public to click on those posts was my description of that post was very different from the way I would have described it when I am targeting a scientific audience. So I think when you do want to go out to the general public, you do have to change your tone. You have to change your advertisement a little bit to get people to click on that specific type of science communication. And then the last thing I just wanted to say on top of what Fabian said was just get out of your like academic science bubble. Like if you have an opportunity to talk to people in politics or your family or high school, go and do it. It's a lot of fun, and that's your easiest way of making a communication.
Yeah, I think there's some really good points there. I can see Ella's just put in the chat box, sort of agreeing with the fact that you need to communicate with other people on their accounts, and sort of you can find people that are relatable if nothing else. And I think it links to, without trying to make it sound like I'm plugging it, but it links to the third event in this series, which is called Network is Net Worth. So that's all about how we can connect with other people and build up sort of our personal, but also professional network, for want of a better word. So it seems like a lot of people, and how sort of friendly and welcoming everybody is here, it almost feels like people don't know each other on a personal level, but the way that you can communicate is not in what I would call at all sort of professional. But the topics that we're talking about are what our jobs are, if that makes sense. So we're talking about academic pursuits, science communication, how we can communicate our work and things like that. So I think it is an example of, if you can get people into your own network and sort of build up relationships as such, albeit online, through things that are relatable, then it does open a lot of other doors and opportunities for, actually, can this person share this to their network, and then you meet another person who joins yours, and so on. And I think for a lot of people that are already actively involved in social media and things like that, it's very self-explanatory of how to build a following, and you just sort of have to keep doing the same things, the basic things. But for people that are just starting, I think it can be really exciting, because you can suddenly go from having that network where you see it's 50 people and you think, oh, it's great, maybe one person replies to my tweet, to suddenly, by putting yourself out there, you've not had to change anything about yourself, but suddenly you have a network of 500 people or something like that. And you don't really have to do much apart from engage with people, tell people what you like, what you don't like, what your opinions are on things, and that's something that everybody can do. So I think that's really interesting. So just so we have enough time for the little Q&A at the end, I'm going to launch the fourth poll now. This one is probably the worst wording I've used on any of the polls. If you've been struggling up to this point, then this one's not made it much better. But how well would you say that you can reach people outside of the academic community? So it's for you to decide what your academic community is. If you choose just the random general public, if you choose your friends and family and people from high school that know nothing about science, that's completely up to you. Completely your choice. Give it 15 more seconds. Okay, let me share those results with you. So how well would you say that you can reach people, with 1 being the worst, like you don't feel like you do it at all, and 5 being that you feel like you're really successful at it? 33% of you gave it a 2, 39 a 3, and 28 a 4. So I think everybody sort of feels reasonably middle of the road, and I'd say that's probably an accurate representation if we were to do this with 2,000 people, 20,000 people, because we all know ways that we can sort of get people to engage with our work, and through different methods. And we see things like Nicole mentioned, statistics on YouTube channels or our Twitter accounts, where we can tell actually these people must be from a certain background. But likewise, I think it's really hard for anyone to give it a 5, because unless you have an obvious connection with you're always going in and working with schools or whatever it may be, people that you know are not academics, then it can be very difficult to actually work out what your true reach is. And we've experienced that a lot with the podcast that we run. So obviously we've had some people on the podcast who on paper have huge followings and massive accounts, but it's impossible to know what sort of people follow them. So of 60,000 followers, maybe 59,500 are all PhD students and researchers themselves. So in that sense, even though we're reaching lots of people, we might actually not be hitting the audience that we potentially would want to hit. So I'll stop sharing that one with you now. And we have about 10 minutes or so left. If anybody else has any questions, things they want to contribute, things to fire into the chat, it can be addressed to one person or just an open comment, anything you like. Now's your time to do so. So feel free to just unmute yourself or type in the chat box. It's completely up to you.
Can I just start by saying thank you?
Yeah, of course.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So first of all, thanks for bringing us all together, and I'm really excited that I found you and all of you guys in the community, and I'm sure this is going to be blowing up, and we're all going to become more and more connected and find better and better ways to communicate with whoever it is that our target audience is, and that can change. You know, I really liked, I forget who it was that was saying this, I apologize, that said, you know, really just kind of talk about one thing and be very clear about it. You don't have to talk about everything. And that's something that I learned when I was a postdoc. I was writing a paper and I put so much information in there in my lab sheet. You don't have to give away the farm all at once. And that's something that we've learned to do in science, sort of trickle it down into a bunch of different papers. It's even more important when we talk to the public quote unquote, because then you know, especially like we're used to holding a lot in our heads at once, and they're just, you know, like you said, on a train, running, you know, busy, 6 kids, whatever, boss is yelling at you. You know, give them one thought, make it clear, make it fun or exciting, and then that'll stick with them. It's like what you learn when you're watching a movie, you know, everybody remembers Interstellar or Inception or whatever, Limitless, because it was interesting. So if you have one thing and you present it in a clear and interesting way, it's a better chance that they'll keep that thought, and then you can give them the next one and then the next one. So I just want to say thanks to everyone. Pauline, your cat is so cute. and yeah, I'm going to.
Thank you very much. I'll just read a question out from the chat box. Helena asks, I was wondering what the panel thinks of Twitter takeovers. Do you think this reaches a general audience?
So for Twitter takeovers, really depends on which account you're taking over, I guess. I think it's a really good opportunity for someone who might not have a big audience to reach a bigger audience, because then they can share more of their expertise. And it's also good for the people who follow that more general account usually to learn about stuff from an expert. So yeah, but the thing with Twitter takeovers is that it's usually scientists taking over scientists' accounts.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if you're then reaching a more general audience. I don't know what the rest thinks.
Yeah, I agree with Fabian. It's definitely this Twitter. I feel like we're in our Twitter bubble, right? We're in our academic Twitter bubble. Maybe all collectively we should try to, you know, branch out a little bit more. It's just so easier to get followers in the academic community.
Yeah, I think I would agree too. That's like I found some great accounts through Twitter takeovers. So in terms of kind of building your academic network, I think they're great.
Mhm.
Yeah, in terms of reaching a general audience, like unless I know there are some people who kind of blend the two, like it's both a personal and a scientific account, then yeah, sure, I'm sure you could reach a more general audience, but I think a lot of us don't really handle our Twitters that way. So I don't know if it really reaches a general audience.
Maybe I can quickly explain why I was asking. So I've done some takeovers, and then I had some conversations during the takeovers with people that I thought were from, let's say, the general public, so that were not in science, and that I thought was really nice. But most of the people were also super interested in science, so maybe either scientists or super interested, and this is also why they follow these accounts. So in terms of reaching people that maybe don't follow this actively, I think it's really hard to find those.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like even if it's just scientists or other scientists, we're not all the same kind of scientists. There's so many different fields, and those Twitter takeovers definitely help, because someone who's doing something completely different from you, they're more or less the same as someone from the general audience. They don't know all of the same stuff. Like they don't know what you know, and they can be very interested in what you do. So it's definitely worth it doing takeovers for sure. Also teaches a lot, I think.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would add as well is that when we sort of talk about how we can reach people that aren't similar to ourselves, I don't think it's necessarily a criticism. And it's not to say that if you're just reaching people that also do a PhD or something like that through a takeover account, I think you're doing better than doing nothing, if that makes sense. You're sort of on the way to, it fulfills a different goal. And I think one thing to note is that there isn't anybody that has a key to the general public. There isn't a certain account or person or organization that can just unlock all people and suddenly all your work can just be told to everyone in a way that they understand. Otherwise, everybody would be experts on everything. But I think there are some sort of accounts and organizations that you can look out for who have segmented a certain area of the public, and they're really good at communicating with them. So one example might be there's a company called Future and Careers who you might have come across, who they help with article writing and reaching audiences and things like that. And one method they have is just to target school children, to try and inspire them about STEM subjects and get them interested in science. So they have a really good network of being able to connect with schools and high schools and things like that. So that's sort of one example of how that would be reaching the non-academic community, I suppose, but it's not reaching the public, because you might be reaching people in the UK age 14 to 19, for example, but it's a good start. And if there was different organizations that target different sort of small niches, then that's a way to do it. But yeah, I don't want anybody to leave thinking that, oh no, I can't target anybody that's got the word PhD in their bio with any of my comments. Just to answer a couple more questions, Israt asked a reasonably broad one, but how can we attract an audience online? So I think the initial comment was sort of, how do people get loads of followers on TikTokers, much more than any scientist can. So what can we do to attract an audience?
So the difference between TikTok and, for example, Twitter, it's a huge difference. For one, is TikTok is the playground of Gen Z, so to speak. And I don't know about the people who are here, but I definitely am not Gen Z. I'm a millennial, and they're really good with all their technology there. So it's very easy for them to connect to each other. Also, the format, for example, on TikTok is a lot different. It's those short videos, and we talked about that before, is that they really like short videos, people in general, but especially now the younger generations, also the students that currently are at the university, they really prefer the short format. I don't know if that's an attention thing, I have to figure that out, but they like shorter videos, and TikTok delivers there. And we can learn from that as well. There's a bunch of people on Twitter, for example, also are on TikTok, and they're posting science videos on TikTok. And it's a whole different game there. And you really have to adapt your science and really focus on that one thing or answer that one question. And you also have to kind of deal with the fact that they're going to call you out for being a millennial most of the time. So yeah, getting more followers, like the TikTokers, it's easier for them because it's a very active platform, and on Twitter it's just a very different biome. I think different generations here, and they're not so used to the whole following and interacting with each other than they are on TikTok.
Yeah. And sorry, carry on, Nicole, if you had an answer to that as well. I'm gonna have to pause and go on to the next question.
Yeah, that's fine.
We have one more, and I just feel TikTok, we'll be wasting our time. We'll be wasting our time compared to this question. So one final question for the panel is, often SciComm is something that PhDs do in their free time or outside of their regular work. How do you manage that? How do you produce your content alongside other things that you're doing?
To be frank, I like doing SciComm better than doing my PhD, so it's not hard for me to find the time. My PI would hate it that I said that, but I find the time because I love it, and it's what keeps me sane, and it keeps me connected to other people. So I don't mind carving out time from my workday to do SciComm. It's part of being a scientist. It's part of my career development. I don't feel guilty at all, working on it on a Wednesday at 2:00 when maybe I should be in lab. I don't mind.
Yeah, I think I definitely have to agree with Carrie. That's like, I really enjoy doing it. It's a lot of fun for me. I think one thing I would give to anyone, especially if you're wanting to do like YouTube videos where the editing's a little bit more intense, I would imagine, than say doing like a podcast or any other like audio format. So it's like, definitely give yourself some leeway with like deadlines when you want a video up. Like I was TAing this summer, and I just knew that it's like, for my own sanity, I can't do lab and YouTube video and TA. Like I can't do all those things. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to have a video out constantly, because you'll burn out. So do what's reasonable for you in a reasonable amount of time. And if nothing else, even if you don't get this huge following, you tried, and it looks great for your CV, especially if you want to do anything teaching related.
Yeah, I agree. Also, like, don't get too hung up on followers or views or how many people read your stuff. Because in the end, you have to do something that you're doing. And if you're focusing on just getting a lot of followers all of the time, you're going to put a lot of pressure on yourself to do stuff that you might not necessarily like. Like, you can start making YouTube videos, but if that's not something you enjoy, then you're gonna have a bad time. The same with writing. If you don't enjoy writing or spending a lot of time writing, you're not gonna have a fun time blogging, and you're just gonna put pressure on yourself because you have 2,000 or 20,000 people looking at your stuff, and you're gonna burn out. It's gonna be a serious issue.
Right. And just so you don't burn out, I schedule breaks in my blogging. So my blog took the month of August off. I'm taking off 2 weeks for Christmas, take off 2 weeks for Thanksgiving. be realistic about what you want to do with your work.
No, definitely. Thank you very much for those opinions. The only thing that I'd add to that as well is I would only ever like you can only do science communication when you have something to communicate. So I don't think it's a case of thinking I need to do something every day and I need to find something that I want to tell an audience about. I think it's absolutely fine to wait until you have something you're passionate about or you think is valuable or needs explaining or a myth that you think needs dispelling. So yeah, I don't think it's something where you can just get stuff out all the time. So yeah, I see we've just gone a little bit over time, so we're probably going to have to wrap it up here. First thing I'd like to say is a massive thanks to our panel, so Nicole, Fabian and Kerry. I appreciate you taking the time out. I know it's coming into the evening, but your responses were brilliant, and I think everyone will join me in appreciating. Helena's got the little clap emoji. You can do one of those if you like. So yeah, thanks for giving up your time, for joining us, and I think it's to you that a reason that a lot of people have come together, because they've seen your interactions online and they've obviously valued you as a person and the insights that you may have, and that's why they've joined you. So I think you should definitely take that as a pat on the back, and you won't be nervous if you ever get asked to do something like this again. And the second thank you is to everybody for attending. As you can see in the top corner, I have been recording the session, so at some point we will add that to the virtual networking tab in the video section, so you can share it and people can catch up, or you can go over a bit of advice if you need it again. But again, without you being here as an audience and the interactions in the chat box, the events just don't have the same feel to them at all. So thank you very much for attending. And if you enjoyed it, we have another one on the 16th, so 2 weeks from today, which is about building business in academia. So it's about if you have a startup, what's the word? If you're inspired to do a startup, if you're motivated to potentially move into industry, sort of different ways that you can use academia and your passion for STEM subjects or whatever it may be to also combine that with some business pursuits as well. And then 2 weeks after that one, we have the one I mentioned earlier, which is all about networking and things like that. And we still have loads of spots open for them. So feel free to go to the virtual networking tab on Scientistt, or it's in our pin tweet on the Scientistt Twitter, and you can just sign up there. So yeah, I hope everyone managed to get something from the event. Hassan, do you have anything you want to conclude with? No pressure.
Yeah, I can say anything. Thank you so much to panelists, Kerry, Fabian, and Nicole, and then also the audience. I think the chat was really entertaining, more entertaining than I thought. So thank you for that as well.
Yeah, Hassan doesn't smile very often, so the fact he's been smiling at the chat, you must have done something well. I'm just joking. All right. This is the really awkward bit that I never really know how to do right. So I'm going to end the call in about a moment after I've done a weird little Zoom wave. So yeah, thanks very much for attending. Do tweet us and let us know any thoughts that you had on the event and things like that. So see you later, everybody. Bye-bye.